Welcome to 3D Synergy. This tutorial will guide you through the creation of a flexible rig and illustrate the technique for switching between IK and FK modes, enabling you to leverage the benefits of both systems in a single rig. Many animators encounter challenges when attempting to implement a dual rigging system where both IK and FK are integrated into a single joint, often resulting in complexity and difficulty in achieving seamless transition between the two control systems. Notice that in this demonstration, the IK and FK rigs are concurrently applied to the same joint, allowing a seamless switch between the two systems and enhancing the animator's ability to produce high-quality outcomes with greater efficiency. This video focuses exclusively on the rigging process of the left leg of the character. A subsequent video will be dedicated to rigging the remaining parts of the body. Before we commence, we invite you to subscribe to our YouTube channel and activate the notification feature by clicking the bell icon, ensuring you receive updates on our latest content. In case if you have any inquiries or require clarification on any aspect of this tutorial, please feel free to post your questions in the comment section below and we will reply promptly. Alright, let's begin. First, I will create a separate layer for each object in the scene. Then, I will rename each layer and make it invisible so it won't show up in the viewport. I will repeat this step for everything else you can see in the viewport. So now this is how it looks. Before I proceed, I will X-ray the joint so as to make it appear more visible in the viewport. Now you can see the joints through the skin. The joints are visible under the skin. This character skin has been bound already to the joint. If you know how to add skin to a character, great, but if you don't know, please comment below. If many people ask me about skinning, I will make a tutorial on it. Now, before you rig a character, make sure that your menu set above is set to rigging. Now, I will create a new layer for the skin. I will hide it and rename it. Next, I will select the joints too. Then I will disable the select joint and enable the snap to point. So now I will start by creating another joint starting from here. Then the knee. Then the leg. The feet and to the toe. Now that we have made one joint, let's move to creating the IK and FK joint. But before we proceed, let's create a layer for the joints. But because we are not selecting the joints, let's enable the select joint. Select the joints from the roots and create a layer for the joints. Rename it to JNT and save. Look at this joint. They are different sizes. Let's make them the same size by selecting all the joints in the outliner. Then go to the channel box and reduce the radius to 0.75. Now you see that all the joints are uniform. Let's take another look at this joint. So as you can see, their sizes are now the same. Now we are going to duplicate these joints. To duplicate, hold on Ctrl and tap D. So now another joint has been created. Next, we will expand the outliner window for better visibility. After that, we will rename the joints using IK for the first ones and FK for the second ones. With the first one renamed as IK, let's proceed to the second one. We will follow the same process, but rename it as FK instead. Now we select the first joint named IK, create a layer for it, and name it IK. Then hide it. Do the same for the second one, but this time name it FK. Now that we have completed this process, we will move on to rigging the IK and FK joints separately. First, we will focus on the IK, then the FK. After that, we will constrain them to the main joints. Before we begin IK rigging, let's follow these steps. First, press the spacebar, then switch to the side view. Check if the joint is slightly bent, as this is necessary for the IK handle to function correctly. As you can see in this video, a slight bend is required for proper IK functionality. Once you have confirmed this, press the spacebar again and return to the perspective view. To start our IK rigging, let's go to the skeleton menu and click this box beside Create IK Handle. Next, we make sure that the current solver is set to rotate plane solver. First, we click the first joint, we jump the second one, and then we click the third one. So now our IK rotate plane handle has been created. Next, we are going to set up controllers for controlling the IK joints. To do this, we go to create, then knobs primitive, then we click the box beside the cycle. Now that the cycle has been created, we modify it the way we want. Then we position it on where it should be. Now to set up the new control, I click on Create, Curve Tool, Bezier Curve Tool. I will also enable the Snap to Grid button. So now let's create something like the letter K for the new control. After that, we convert it to knobs curve by going to Modify, Convert to knobs curve. Then we center pivot by going to Modify, Center Pivot. Now we enable the snap to point and snap it to the new joint. We move it to the desired position and then go to Modify, Freeze Transformation. In this video, all our IK rig controller will be on a blue color texture. So to give it a blue color texture, follow these steps. So let's rename our IK handle. To set up the new control, first we select the new controller. Then we select the IK handle. And then we go to constraint, pole vector. Now this is the result. Next, we are going to create an IK handle, but this time around it won't be a rotate plane but a single chain solver. So now we click on this joint and then click on this. Then we have created one. Then we're still going to create another one. But before that, let's rename this. With your current solver still at single chain solver, select the fit joint and the toe joint. Then rename it. Now we are going to create the leg poses, but to create the first pose, let's select the rotate plane IK handle and the first single chain IK handle, then group it, then press insert in the keyboard and then move the pivot behind the leg. To create the second pose, select only the second single chain handle and group it. To move the pivot to the toe joint, tap insert on the keyboard and then tap on snap to point and then move it at the toe joint. Next, we will group the two pose joints. Press insert on the keyboard and move the pivot to the leg. We will position it at the tip of the toe. This should be our pose 3. Then I will click the IK leg control, go to modify freeze transformation by selecting the pose 3, the IK leg control and then tap P on the keyboard to parent. Now let's rename the controllers. Now our work should look exactly like this. We have now completed the IK rig, so we are going to move next to the FK. But before we do that, now in the viewport we will select all the IK rigs, go to the layer, right click on the IK layer, then tap on add selected objects. This is how the IK rig looks on the character. Okay, let's move to the FK rig. First, we will start by creating a null cycle by going to the create menu, null primitive, then cycle. Now that the cycle has been created, let's position it. First, we scale and move it to the character's leg. After positioning the cycle on the character's leg, we duplicate it with the shortcut Ctrl D on the keyboard. Now let's position the FK knee controller. After that, we duplicate it and move it to the hip. So now let's position the hip controller. After the positioning, we color texture it to red by going to the attribute editor, enable override, move this button till the red color appears. Now let's do the same for other controllers. We are still going to create two more controllers for the feet and the toe joints. To do this, we duplicate this controller and move to the channel box. Then we go to translate Y and 0 it so that the controller will be on the ground level. After creating it, we scale and position it. Now let's duplicate this controller to create the toe controller. After that, we scale and position. Now that the positioning are complete, let's select all the FK controllers. After the selection, we go to modify and freeze transformation so that we will zero all their transformation in the channel box. Now let's hide the character and select this controller. Then we tap insert in the keyboard. After that, we enable snap to point and move this pivot to this joint. Next, we tap this controller and move the pivot to the following joint. We will do the same for this one and move it to the following joint, and this one as well. So finally, we will repeat the same step for this one. Now that the final adjustments to the pivoting and positioning have been completed, we will proceed to the next step of renaming the controllers. I have now completed the renaming of the controllers, so let's proceed to the next step of constraining them to the joints. So first, we select this controller, holding shift and select the joint, and go to constrain, parent, then we select the box beside the parent. We leave the settings at default and tap this button. Now we repeat the same process for the rest of the controllers. Now that we have completed the parent constraining, let's select the controllers accordingly from the toe to the hip. After the selection, let's tap P on the keyboard continuously until all the controllers are unselected except the last one. So this is how it looks like. Finally, we have completed the FK rig. Our next step is to create a switch to control it. But before we do that, let's select all the FK controllers in the viewport and add them to the FK layer option in the channel box. To add it, with our cursor on the option FK, we right click and click on Add Selected Objects. Now that our IK and FK controllers are fully set up and complete, we can proceed to the next stage of creating the switch to control them. Now let's go to Bezier Curve tool and create a test IK the way we created the IK new controller. Let's enable the snap to grid and disable the snap to point. But before we create the IK and FK text, let's create a switch. So after the switch creation, let's convert the Bezier curve to knobs curve by going to modify, convert, then Bezier curve to knobs. Now let's rename it to switch. Still selecting the curve, let's go to modify and center pivot. Let's adjust the shape a little bit. Now let's position it beside the character's leg. Now that the switch positioning is complete, let us create the IK and FK text with the Bezier curve tool. Let's start with IK by enabling the snap to guide. Now let's create for FK. The creation of the IK and FK text is completed. Let's select the both and convert it to knobs curve and center pivot. Now we are going to position both above the switch controller. After that, we are going to add some attributes to the switch by going to modify, add attributes. Let's give it a long name, switch. Let the minimum attribute be 0 and the maximum 1. After that, let's change our menu set from rigging to animation. We go to the menu, key, set driven key. Set. Before we set the set driven key, let's rename the controllers. Now, before we proceed with setting the visibility of the switch, specifically, we will configure the switch that when the IK controller is visible, the FK controller will be hidden, and conversely, when the FK controller is visible, the IK controller will be hidden in the viewport. Now that the renaming are complete, let's proceed. Let's freeze a transformation of this controller. Let's do the same for these ones as well. Now I will select the FK. In the set driven key window, I will tap the button load driven. Then select the switch and tap the button load driver. Now for the switch, we select switch, and for the FK, we select visibility. Next, we tap on the button key. Going to the next step, going to the channel box, we change the value of the switch to 1 and changing the value of the FK visibility from on to 0 and key. We will do the same for the IK, load driven, visibility and key. Next, we change the value of the switch to 0 and change the value of the IK visibility from on to 0, key. As you can see in this video, when I slide the switch from 0 to 1, the FK controller becomes hidden and the IK controller appears. Before we move to the next step, select the IK and FK symbol and press P on the keyboard to parent. Now, we are going to make the IK and FK text not to be clickable in the viewport. To do this, we select the IK, move to the attributes editor, enable override, then beside display type, we select reference. As you can see in this video, I'm unable to click or highlight the IK text. That is how it should be. Now, we repeat the same process for the FK symbol. To repeat the same process for the FK, change the value of the switch to 0. When the FK symbol or text becomes visible, we'll make it unclickable, just the way we did to the IK text. Let's select the IK and FK text from the outliner, then select all the attributes, right click, lock and hide selected. Next, let's texture the switch. Next, we are going to constrain the IK and FK to the main joint. To get it right, select all the other joints first, then choose the main joint last. The FK toe joint, the IK toe joint, and then the main toe joint. Then we will parent constrain them together. We will do the same for the other joints. Instead of going back to the menu, just press G on your keyboard to repeat the last action. Now, both the IK and FK joints are constrained to the main joint. As you can see in this video, if I move one of the controller, you will discover that the main joint is between the IK and FK joints. Now, let's set up the character so that when the switch is set to IK, all the main joints will be controlled by IK, and when the switch is set to FK, all the main joints will be controlled by FK. To do that, we are going to make use of the set-driven key and the parent constraint of the main joint. To find the parent constraint of the main joint, select any part of the main joint that was parent constrained, putting your mouse on the outliner. Press F on the keyboard and you will see the list of the parent constraints that was added to the main joint. Let's look at these parent constraints. At first, you might notice that the IK and FK joints have similar names, but these names are different from the main joint name. These names you see before the parent constraint are actually the main joint name. Since the joint has already been set up and named, I'm using simple names for the IK and FK joints to make it easier for you to understand in this video tutorial. So now let's proceed. Let's set driven key by going to Key, Set Driven Key, then Set. We will start with the tie bend by selecting the tie bend parent constraint. Load driven. Then select the switch and load driver. Then switch. Now looking at the bottom end of the parent constraint, you discover that it has two options, the IK and the FK. We will write 0 to the constraint of the FK because the switch constraint is in IK. So when IK is 0, FK will be 1. When FK is 1, IK will be 0. Selecting the both of them, we will press key. Now go to the switch and change the value to 1. Next, we go to the parent constraint and change FK to 1, IK to 0. After that, we press key on the keyboard to complete the process. Now, we are going to do the same thing for the remaining parent constraints of the main joints. We need to be extremely careful in this process because even a small mistake can cause a big problem. If we make an error, it can run all our work or even destroy it. So, we must double check every step to ensure everything is correct. One tiny mistake can lead to hours of lost work. So let's take our time and be very precise. Remember, accuracy is key here and we can't afford to make any mistakes. So let's move to the next parent constraint, load driven. Because our switch is selected already, then we go to the parent constraint, we change the values, and then we highlight the IK and FK and key. After that, we go back to the switch and change the value. After changing the value, we come back to the parent constraint and change the value of the IK and FK. After that, we press key on the keyboard to key. Now we move to another parent constraint. Let's repeat the same process. Now the last one. Now, this stage is completed. Now that I have finished setting up the constraints for the IK and FK to the main joint, let's bring our character to life. This is the exciting part where we get to see our hard work in action. As you can see in this video, when I move the character's leg, it will automatically switch to the IK mode, allowing for smooth and natural looking movements. But if I change the switch value, the leg will then move to the FK mode, giving us precise control over the character's action. Let's take a closer look and see how seamless the character switches between IK to FK modes. I hope you understood what I just did. If you have any questions or need clarification, please ask in the comment section. Don't hesitate to reach out if you are unsure about anything. Now let's move on to the next step. To bring it back to its former position, I will zero out the controllers. Because I'm selecting this character's body, I will disable this select object button. Select the controllers again and zero it. Now, let's do the same for the IK controllers. We are setting up a driven key to connect IK and FK controllers. This lets us control which controllers are visible, making it easy to switch between systems. When IK is active, IK controllers appear, and when FK is active, FK controllers appear. This saves time and effort, making our workflow more efficient. So now, let's start by going to the key menu, Set Driven Key, Set. In this stage, you may choose all the FK controllers or the controllers which other controllers are parented to. Next, Load Driven, then select the switch and load driver. Now, when the switch and the FK controllers appear, as you can see in this video, visibility for the FK controllers, while for the switch, then key. Next, we'll change the value of the switch from 0 to 1 and the FK visibility from on to 0. After this, we key. Without changing the value of the switch, we select all the IK controllers and load driven. Without changing any value, highlight all the IK controllers, select the visibility and key. Next, we will select the switch and change the value to 0. And also change the visibility of the IK controllers from on to 0. Next, we will tap the key button to key. As you can see in this video, when I select the switch and change the value, you discover that when IK is active, IK controllers will appear, and when FK is active, FK controllers will appear. So this is what we want. Now, let's watch this video and see how it works. As I select the FK controllers and move them, you will see that the body moves too. This is because the FK controllers are connected to the body. But if I switch to the other option and change the value to 1, you will notice that it switches to the IK controllers. This means I can now control the IK controllers from the new option. The controllers and the switch are connected, allowing me to control the body's movement from either option. This is what we want to achieve. Now that we understand this step, let's move on to the next step. Now, we will choose all the FK controllers. Then, we will go to the channel box. In the channel box, we will select all the scale attributes. After that, we will right click and choose the lock and hide selected. We lock all the scale attributes to avoid making a mistake when we want to rotate the FK controllers. We don't want to accidentally scale them too, so we lock the scale attributes to prevent this mistake from happening. Locking the scale attributes of the FK controllers is important, but you can also lock all the other controllers in the scene. This helps avoid mistakes. However, in this video, I'm only focusing on the FK controllers to keep it quick and save your time. Next, we are going to create 2 more controllers for the waist. We can achieve this by creating a knobs curve. Next, we scale and position it at the waist. After the positioning, we duplicate and scale the new curve. After creating the new curve, we can edit it to make it look unique and different from the original curve we created. So now let's give both a color texture. Next, we select the both curve and freeze transformation. After that, we will pick each cycle and place the pivots right at the joint. Remember, before we place the pivot at the joint, we must tap Insert in the keyboard and enable the snap to point. Next, we are going to select the curve and select the joint. Then we go to the constraint menu and select parent to parent constraint it to the joint. Repeat the same for the other curve. The joint for the inner curve comes first, then the outer curve's joint. I will make the inner curve a child of the outer curve. It should look something like this. I think you understand what I'm doing, but if you don't understand and you have a question, please write it in the comments. Now let me check if the IK and FK are working properly on the character. As you can see, they are not moving correctly. To fix this, I will select the IK and FK joints and connect them to this joint. As you can see, I parented both the IK and FK to this joint. Now let's proceed further. Looking at this video, you will discover that the IK is now working properly. But the FK is not working properly, so let's fix it. It's just a minor issue. The reason is because the FK controller has not been parented to the hip controller. So let's do that now. To do that, we'll select this control and next select this inner controller and then press P on the keyboard to parent. Now let me check if it's working correctly. As you can see, it's now working properly. So now both the IK and FK are working properly now. So now we are going to go to the next stage. Remember, earlier in this video, I created 3 different poses for the leg. To use these poses, we need to add a special settings to the IK controllers, but I won't cover that in this video. Let's create a toe controllers. For the toe controller, let's create a cycle. Next, we scale and position it to the big toe. Now let's duplicate this cycle to create a control for the rest of the toes. So now let's select all the controls, freeze transformation, and duplicate it to create another controller for the joints before this one. Next, we are going to snap their pivots to the joints that they are controlling by enabling the snap to point and pressing insert in the keyboard. When this is achieved, we highlight all the controllers and freeze transformation. So now we are going to select this curve, select this, and press P on the keyboard to parent. Let's repeat this process for the rest of the curves. When that is achieved, we will select all these big curve. Select this, this and this. Then we press Ctrl G on the keyboard to group. After grouping, we will tap Insert on the keyboard. And move the pivot to the joint that connects the toes. Next, we disable the snap to point. Now, we are going to locate the joints that connect the toes in the outliner by selecting the joint, going to the outliner and press F. Now, we will select the toe group, Ctrl select the joint that connects the toe, and press P on the keyboard to parent. Now that we have parented the toe group to the joint, let's test it out. In this video, you will see that when I move the IK or FK controllers, the toe controller will move too. This is because we have linked them together, so they work as a team. This will help us create smooth and natural movements for our character, which is important for making the animation look realistic. By connecting the controllers like this, we can make the character's movements look more lifelike. So now let's constrain the toe control to their joints by first selecting the control, then select the joint and go to Constrain, Parent Constrain. Repeat this process for the remaining controllers and the joints. Now let's see how it looks. I want to make sure I did the parent constraint correctly, so I'm testing it by moving each curve. This will help me confirm if I set it up right. Now that I've confirmed it, I'll check if it's working with the IK and FK controllers. Let me hide the joint so that you will see it properly. Next, we'll log the scale attributes of all the toe controllers. We have come to the end of this video. Thanks for watching our IK and FK tutorial. We hope you learned something new and useful today. If you enjoyed this video, please let us know in the comments below. If you have any question or need further clarification on any of these steps, feel free to ask in the comment section. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more tutorials, tips and tricks on animation and rigging. See you in the next video.